Welcome back to Natural AF. I'm Isaac.
And I'm Alexa.
And this show is all about reconnecting to our natural state of being and finding out what it means to be truly natural AF. And this episode, we get into some really interesting conversations with a legendary man who I consider a bit of a mentor, a role model, a friend, and just a legend.
Yeah, so we've got Dave Armstrong from the Living Free movement on today, who is a dear friend of ours. I mean, he feels like family. Him and his family, we just love them to death. And you really can't get anyone more natural AF than Dave, in my opinion. He, as you'll hear in this episode, he just lives so authentically. And I think he's done that for most of his life, even if he didn't really know it. But I think I think he's been pretty divinely guided throughout his life. And, he does things big, and he's such a go-getter. And, he just sees the possibilities. He doesn't really see the limitations, which I love about him. So, yeah, it was a great chat we had with him.
You know what I love about it too? If you talk to him and you see Dave, when you see the episode, he doesn't, say a bunch of spiritual sounding words. He doesn't talk about manifestation, this and that. He just is a real solid masculine dude who just does shit and stuff that he's interested in, stuff that he finds impactful and valuable. And he doesn't really waste time trying to I've never really heard him talk about manifestation and all. And that's really popular for people to talk about. We talk about it quite a bit. He just does it.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I don't even know what goes on in his head, but he's like, oh, we're going to do a festival. Who do we know? Like, he just asks questions. Like, who do we know that's done festivals before? People pop up and they show up. Cool. You guys want to work with us?
Well, I don't even think it happened like that. I actually think he put it out. Like, we have talked about doing a festival, like, from when I first met him, which was over a year and a half ago now. And then when they started talking about it, I think the people just kind of came, which again, to me, that just shows, like, when you're living in alignment and, you're being of service to others and your intentions are pure, the right people just come. And I think Dave even said that during the interview. Yeah. He's such an inspiration. And I think people are really going to enjoy this conversation.
Yeah. We talk about the festival a bit in this. And it was at the end of that festival that we felt a new wind of energy and inspiration to relaunch this podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
And it just goes back for me to when I met Alex Zach and Mike Winter out at Music and Sky back in California a couple years ago. And that's when I first got this inspiration to do a podcast, because people like Dave, and identify with him a bit, even though I think he's much more legendary than I am. And he's done some big stuff. And it's super interesting to hear him talk about the business that he's grown, or businesses, and the Antarctica stuff he's done. But for people like us that don't have like this long history of doing yoga and Kundalini yoga and do all the, mantras and all this other stuff, we just go through life sort of by accident, finding our ways into these interesting stories and facing challenges, overcoming obstacles. It's just a part of our being, and it's not something that you have to put on. It's not something that you have to learn all the right lingo for. It's more natural than natural. It's just, courageous, not limiting yourself to smallness when you're doing something. It's like, if you're going to do a festival, you might as well do something with thousands of people. And just being open to those possibilities and having this faith in yourself and in God, that you're going to pull it off. And it's almost a little bit of, it's not arrogance, but it's like this, of course, like if I'm going to do it, if it's good enough for me, it's going to be amazing. And a lot of other people are going to enjoy it as well. And that's part of this podcast. It's part of the LFM, the Living Free movement that Dave began with his wife, Erin. And I can't wait for you guys to hear all about it, and hopefully join us on there, and we'll interact with you and see you at future events.
Yeah, and it felt really fitting to title this episode Creating the New World, because that was the theme for the festival, was creating the new. And we talk about this during the episode, and that's what Dave's all about. He's all about solutions. He's all about creating the new. So that's what we're all about. So we love it.
Yeah.
But before we get into the episode, when this episode drops, we will have extended our Black Friday sale. So if you want to snag 20% off all of our products site-wide, get onto that now. The code to use is BFS20.
Yep.
So that'll get you 20% off site-wide. So head to naturalartform.com. The link is in the show notes, and take advantage of our Black Friday sale before it ends.
And we're so grateful for everyone that's already supported our business and supported the show. And without further ado, we'll just jump right into it, this interview with Dave.
Enjoy the episode, guys. Dave has a background in founding and running successful businesses in the elite sports performance, sports medicine, and education sectors. He is also an accomplished adventure specialist, having led unique adventure experiences around the world, including sailing and diving in Antarctica, beyond Everest Base Camp, Vietnam veterans return tours, and multiple crossings of the Kokoda Track. With all this under his belt, his biggest challenge came in 2020 when he was diagnosed with cancer. Rather than just accept the diagnosis and treatment options offered by the mainstream medical industry, Dave sought to find alternative treatment protocols in the natural health space. This extensive search inspired the creation of the HealMe platform, where members could connect with experts and access alternative health information free from censorship. Dave's aim was to create a platform where men and women could gain inspiration from one another, step out of fear, and connect with each other. As the community grew, the platform expanded to what we now know as the Living Free movement, a one-stop community-engaged platform covering health, lawful remedy, growing and farming, spirituality, and education. The most recent accomplishment of Dave's is the success of the Living Free Festival, which was a first of its kind in Australia and hosted many talented independent music artists and an array of leading guest speakers, including international guests Cal Washington, Mike Winner, and Alex Zek. Dave is committed and passionate about expanding the Living Free movement to help inspire all members to live their best, most prosperous and authentic lives, and is focused on implementing major projects that help support health outcomes for as many people as possible. He is also on the board of InPower Movement, a platform designed to help people reclaim their authority with the use of commercial administrative process, and is a dedicated and engaged husband and father of 3 beautiful children. Welcome, Dave.
Wow, what an intro.
What an intro, indeed.
Yeah, that covers about a sliver of it, man. But it's so good to have you here.
It's good to be with you guys.
Thanks. So we always want to open this up with our first-time guests and just ask you, like, what are some of your most significant life events that sort of led you to where you are today? And you might want to talk a bit about your background, how you grew up, in a nutshell, and how you got to where you are today.
Well, it's been a big journey, as that sort of intro indicated, but probably the turning point for me, I was a dive instructor up in Brisbane. There was somebody who turned up to ask about, well, they were asking about dive gear, but they were telling me about an event that they were going to, which was a boat that was sailing to Antarctica. And so I ended up turning up to this talk straight after I finished my shift and spoke to the owners of this vessel, this yacht, and asked if you could scuba dive down there, being a dive instructor. They didn't really know. And anyway, I ended up designing a scuba diving trip, sailing from South America. When I was 23 when I did it. So I started when I was 22. Putting that together. And that was probably a big turning point for me in the adventure side. That sort of opened a whole bunch of doors. I became the Dive Antarctica guy when we came back, and I worked for an adventure company out of Brisbane doing Kokoda Tracks and different things. And then I ended up creating my own adventure company and moving back down to Melbourne, where I lived previously. So that was a pivotal point. Once we also moved down to Melbourne, I was looking for a place to train our clients, and I came across Amy Park Stadium, which was being built at the time, and that was the home of the Melbourne Storm, Melbourne Victory, Melbourne Football Club. And I ended up proposing to utilize their facility to train my clients, and then also take over the management rights of that whole sports performance area, which then opened up all of these doors into sports performance and sports medicine. And so that was another sort of 10 years of me doing that sort of work as well, where we ended up having multiple facilities in Australia. And so I ended up expanding out to Greater Western Sydney with the GWS Giants up there. And then we had our own facilities as well. So I had this sort of adventure business. I had this sports performance, sports medicine, and then also education of the athletes before my sort of turning points, which came from the birth of my first daughter. So once I had her, I sort of investigated into vaccines through one of our athletes, which was a guy called Nick Patterson, which you guys know well. And so Nick was one of our athletes, and sort of that opened up the door into looking at vaccines and the dangers of, and that sort of took me on a whole nother path outside of the corporate world and the business ownership world, and looking into what we could do to try to help uncover, and release some of the stuff that we'd found, not only in the vaccine side of things, but also, child trafficking stuff that we'd discovered, and a whole range of different things. We tried to start political parties, and it just became a mission to try to make legitimate, I guess, some of these things that were taboo, and they were conspiracy type things. And we, when we researched them and found out that they weren't, we basically put a whole lot of effort in trying to expose them and do what we could to help humanity. So that was sort of probably a couple of the key turning points in my life.
Wow. So what year was that when you met Nick? And then
Nick was an athlete with us for a couple of years prior to him putting out this information about the vaccine.
Okay.
So he was already an athlete, and I used to go and watch him fight. He was a MMA professional athlete. He was close to getting a UFC contract, and we were looking after quite a few fighters. We had a wrestling room, and we had his coach and everything have a fighting room in one of our facilities. And so I knew all of those guys pretty well. I used to go and watch and then go backstage and have a chat to them after their fights and that sort of thing. And Nico was one of those athletes.
Nice.
But he basically, once he posted that information, it just came at the right timing with the birth of my first daughter, where I felt like I had to at least look into it out of respect for knowing him and knowing he was a good guy. But I was actually hoping that he was crazy and true, and I could vaccinate my children and be normal like everyone else, and not have to be an anti-vaxxer and all of that type of thing.
Yeah, not that I forgot, but even like just reading the intro, I was like, that's another thing we could have added, the stuff that you and Nick have done together with the child trafficking. And we want to have Nick on, but we would actually love, maybe we can get the two of you on to talk about that together, because that could be a whole episode just on its own. So then fast forwarding to when you started the Living Free movement, how did you connect with, because we were just talking about this with some of our Living Free friends, some members that we're really good friends with, and they were saying how you and Tom met for the first time in person at the picnic, the first picnic you did at the LFM property up here in January of last year. But obviously you guys had started the Living Free movement before that. So how did you connect with Tom, and how did the Living Free movement come to be from there?
Yeah, so effectively, Aaron and I created the HealMe aspect of the platform, and we'd been in conversation with Tom about joining and helping with some of the podcasts and doing that sort of thing, based on the fact that we'd done some previous work with him. He'd promoted something that I was a part of, which was a vaccine non-consent letter, which went quite viral. There was about 8,000 people that went through the vaccine non-consent process, which was an automated system that I built. And Tom promoted it on his site. He'd become well known from a video that he did, which was you can't catch a virus. And so he had a following from that. And then, people were asking him what to do about the vaccine issues, especially with the whole COVID stuff coming on. And he promoted the things that we were doing. And I saw the way that he was handling himself and, discussing stuff and promoting things. And so I just reached out to him and asked him if he'd like to be a part of HealMe and join us on that side of things. So yeah, we didn't actually meet for probably a couple of years, due to COVID and due to other circumstances, and then we caught up in person.
Nice. Yeah. Was that part of the Empower movement, the stuff you were working on with Cal?
No. So this was another project. So as I said, wow. I just was working on whatever I could to help people. There was several websites. So to start off with, I actually juggled both worlds. I was still running my company and doing some of the things on the side, but I didn't really want to cross over. I had government contracts. I had, I don't know if you want to say a reputation or, something to protect as the CEO of multiple companies. You don't want everyone to know that you're an anti-vaxxer or you're trying to help these groups in the background. So I would help build their websites or do things in the background, but I didn't put myself in front of the camera or do any of that for the first couple of years. And so I would just work with them in the back, to help them, but also protect what I was doing moving forward. But it got to a point, really the turning point was when Nico and I went across to Arizona and did some stuff with the anti-child trafficking stuff that I felt like it was important to stand in front of the camera and give testimony as to what we'd seen. And I was still working and in those areas, but I'd made the conscious decision that I didn't care about the outcome at that point. And, it has actually somewhat blocked my ability to work in those sectors. I actually applied for a government job after I left doing all the sports performance stuff, and they blocked me based on the work that I'd done. So that was interesting, but the amount of but now opened, which is what I would encourage other people is, I think a lot of people feel the way that I did in those times, but once I accepted that, the truth was more important than to put myself and do whatever was required, a whole lot more doors have opened and a whole lot more opportunities. So although I've been restricted on probably getting government contracts and, working for government or doing whatever because of this, that's not really a thing anymore. That concerns me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've grown past that. I think one of the things we've seen, especially post-COVID, was just all these government institutions and agencies and, big corporations shooting themselves in the feet essentially by mandating stuff. And I kind of took that as a sign, is if they're mandating you get the vaccine for your job, it was kind of a sign that job didn't really matter that much anyways. The people that were really essential that walked off the job, but they called back later, like nurses and teachers and some of that wouldn't take the jab. It was just evidence to me that, I don't know, they just didn't care about you that much if they wanted you to do that.
Yeah. And I think what that time did for so many people, like just like for you, like you said, it really did kind of put people, they were between a rock and a hard place, and they really had to make a decision about like who like, for me, like I'm just going to speak from my personal experience. It was like, what am I really going to like do here? Because, and like for me, and my mum, Dave, like there was no question whatsoever, like for us. And like I made it very well known to my workplace that I was not, they actually didn't mandate it, but they were, because we had, the company I worked for at the time had clinics in shopping centers. They had to kind of abide by the general government guidelines or whatever. So during the lockdown, they sent out an email asking everyone like if they were going to get the jab so they could figure out if they could open clinics back up. And I sent them this long email back. I sent them like statistics. I sent them information sheets. I sent them all this stuff basically saying like, you don't even need to do this. Like as a business, you can just like say no and open up your clinics. And I just didn't, because at that point I was like, I don't care if they're going to get rid of me, they can get rid of me. And they didn't. they actually created a new role for me. And I think that time really showed people that I think when you step into your authentic self and act in accordance to who you are and what you believe in, like life rewards you, you know, like I know so many people, like in my case, I got a role created for me. I started working from home and less than a year later, I got a pay rise. Lots of people left and started their own businesses and they were thriving. You know, they, like Isaac said, some did lose their job, but then they got called back and offered more money because they were so desperate for workers. So yeah, it's such an example of just stepping into your authentic self. And because I was going to ask you that, but you went down there anyway, with like, what was the turning point for you where you decided to like do that? And again, it was something that was important to you where you're like, I need to speak up about this.
Yeah, I think we've all got decisions to make in that area, and you've got to pick what's critical on your life path as to, you know, to what you're going to stand up for. And, you know, to me, the truth was always important. And, you know, I mean, I tried a bunch of things the same as Nick. We were on that journey together right from the start. We did things together. But, you know, I set up a political party. I tried to put motions forward on that there would be mandatory sentences for pedophiles, there would be a sex register list, all of these things. I got told it was political suicide to put those things up, that no one's going to give you preferences if they're your policies, which I think is crazy in itself. You know, Nico got kicked out of the political party. He was a part of the Liberal Party, and they were setting up some good things. There were some good people within the party trying to take over and, you know, keep control of those who had good values. So there was, you know, this growing process of thinking about the next step. What can we do? What can we do? Realizing that on the political side, there was not much hope left. You know, we went above the line, and then on countback, apparently we lost, and, you know, these types of things. So, you know, it was only as part of that journey learning, you know, that helped us go towards Living Free movement, which was effectively teaching people to become responsible and accountable and set up the new, which is a total, you know, it's almost as though we can't keep fighting the old, which was something that I did for a long period, trying to fight the old, expose the old. And the same thing that you said in your letter, that you had all these statistics, and you know, I used to try to learn all of that information so that if anyone asked me about my views on vaccination, I could spit out all of these statistics. And I thought the more that I knew, the more likely they are to believe me. And it's just not the case. That was part of the learning process as well, is that the more that we try to fight or keep hold of the old instead of just creating the new, to me, it's much more positive. And that was a really big turning point, I guess, in my waking up period, is realizing that I had to let go of some of that stuff, those anger, that frustration, that, you know, that type of thing, and just start focusing on the positive stuff and bringing in that into my life, which, you know, is probably the biggest, you know, journey point of waking up, I think.
I see this intersection between that and these other groups. Like we met Alex Zek at the festival. His thing, the way forward, Alpha Cast, and the way that they're going about building their community, encouraging similar things, building the new. It's this thread that it's like a golden thread around the world. You know, I'm with the Bears and Owen Benjamin. I know he's been just beating that drum for a while. And was there other input that led you to that realization, or was it just kind of a logical thing where you're just like, the more we fight this, the more we get tangled up in this web we can't get out of, versus, you know, what made you go towards building something outside of that and just separating from that fight and just, you know, building an alternative?
Yeah, well, I mean, naturally, my background was building stuff, right? Building businesses, building adventures, building, you know, and obviously going back to those early years, I learned that at the age of 22, I set my target on scuba diving and sailing in Antarctica, which no one had done before, that I knew of commercially. And then I pulled that off, and knew internally that I could pull these sort of major projects off. So it was a natural thing to want to build, you know, something new. But additional to that, what I realized that we were complaining about the old, but it was, to me, it was mostly corrupted is what I'd found. And I don't think it was savable. So I was wasting a lot of energy where it's like, well, what is the alternative? What can we do different? And then I think opening up, probably that legal pathway or the lawful sort of pathway, it was learning that there are ways in which we can operate outside of their system and just simply choose to not participate in the same way. And I think that energy focus changed when I learned more about the law.
And I wanted to ask you, Dave, in terms of your waking up process, was it something, because obviously that happened for a lot of people in the last 4 years when COVID hit. But did you kind of look back on your life and were there certain points, even as a child, where you questioned government or you questioned authority? Could you look back, when you kind of quote unquote woke up, could you look back and kind of see some of the where you kind of had a natural inclination towards that? Or was it you were just whoa, all this kind of stuff came to you and it was in one go, it just hit you?
No, I was a child. If you ask my parents, I questioned everything and would argue on everything. My dad was a lawyer, and I think I was the youngest of four. So I think I actually challenged him the most because I would. So he actually didn't like that with his ego and all the rest of it being challenged, especially with a young child. So that's always been my natural thing, is to ask why and to question things and to not be scared of things. Because having older brothers and, I was always trying to prove that I was tough enough or whatever to deal with their craziness. So, there was these natural things I think that were built inside me from the start that that have helped me on that journey. But I didn't like authority at school. I didn't like authority really anywhere. I used to just try to avoid, getting in trouble by outsmarting them. So, and it's probably not dissimilar to what I do right now. I try to avoid getting into trouble by outsmarting what they're doing. So.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
That's smarter than my approach. I'm the youngest of four as well. I have an older half sister as well, but I'm the youngest, and I just go at them like a spider monkey.
Yeah, definitely didn't try and outsmart anyone this one.
Yeah, I'm learning though. I'm looking around me. I'm like, no one else is acting like a wild man. I should just go gray for a bit and just blend in.
Yeah, but no, it's interesting because a lot of people that ended up kind of becoming more well-known, after COVID, and that was speaking out and became more prominent during that time. Lots of them said the same thing when they were interviewed, when they asked about how they grew up. Even for me, there were a lot of things that I was very asleep to, but I was the same. I used to question, I remember when I was really little and I'd ask my mum about something and she'd explain it and I go, but why? And then she'd keep explaining again. I go, but why? I just always wanted to get to the bottom of why. And yeah, there were definitely certain things that, I remember learning in school that didn't quite sit right, but then we're so conditioned through, I went all the way through the schooling system, and it just kind of get that natural inclination to ask questions, which I think we all have to some degree. It's just conditioned out of us. And I also always had a problem with authority. I remember considering joining the army at one point, and then I was just like, nah, I couldn't do it because I can't handle people telling me what to do day in and day out. So yeah, it's interesting now how that's manifesting, that these people are really letting that part of them shine, really.
Yeah, I think what I find interesting is when we catch up at these picnics or we catch up, at the festival, and we speak to different people, and some of them, can be quite old in comparison. They could be 70s, close to their 80s, and then you get into a deeper conversation with them, and they're really fascinating people who have challenged the system and done all of these things. So I think naturally those people have gathered together, and that's been really a fascinating thing where usually your friendship groups and your the groups in which you socialize with are very much the same age, of the same thinking. You know, you grew up or you went to school together. I think there's been a big separation of ideas and philosophies. And, you know, I know a whole lot of my friends wouldn't even know what I'm doing. If they did know what I'm doing, would not agree with what I'm doing and maybe not even talk to me anymore, which is, I find fascinating. But the people that have come into my life are really interesting people that you want to be around and talk to and have these conversations and learn more about their life. And it's a much broader group of people now, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's arguably the best part of the Living Free movement and the platform and what's been created there in the community is that we've met so many awesome people through that and people that have become really, really good friends. Like, and I think like Isaac said this, around the time that I first met you guys, which was about a year and a half ago now, he had just gone to the first Bear Fest, I think the year before that. And we actually experienced the same thing where we were meeting people for the first time, but it felt like we'd known them forever. Like, you know, within a weekend. I mean, you were there when I first met Chloe, and after a couple of days, people were like, "Oh, you guys friends?" You know, and Chloe was like, "No, we just met," and we've been really close friends ever since. And Isaac experienced that with the bear community as well.
Yeah, it's amazing the kind of people that are attract to these places and the intersections that start happening. And I've been a bit of a go-between. I met Sam through a friend of mine. Sam helped orchestrate the Bear Festival, and then he just asked me out of the blue to MC it. And so for 2 years, I was kind of the announcer, speaker, you know, introducer guy. But I just got to meet all these different people. One of my friends, Chance Garton, who has a podcast, I ran into him at the Music and Sky Festival, and it was just interesting. We had to talk about that, how the bear thing was very masculine, very yang, very like, let's literally throw chunks of wood as a competition for fun. And that was one of our main events. And then Living Free, or the Music and Sky was breath work and yoga and like Kundalini yoga and all this stuff. And we were just like, yeah, we'd like to see more of like a blend of these two, because on the bears, they need to open up a little bit more to like health and spirituality, because, you know, they're still eating pretty, you know, some of them still eat like, you know, McDonald's and stuff. But it's like, it's cool to see people from different backgrounds sort of orbiting around this similar movement, making our own ecosystems, having our own supply chains, even where we're, you know, making products for our community and businesses that serve this community. And yeah, and it's cool to see the Music and Sky and the bear stuff intersect with LFM, because it's just, to me, it just goes to show that this is a worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah, it sounds almost tribal, doesn't it? You've got the men doing these things, and, you know, you've got another group doing these more spiritual things. And I wonder, you know, as much as we're saying it's about creating the new, I wonder if it's more about going back to the old and some of these things that were successful for many years that were thrown out by society, because a lot of this connection and helping each other, you know, I mean, you look at some of the different groups who, that's the traditional thing. If someone was to get married, they would gather together and they would help build them a house. You know, that type of community thing is quite prevalent in a lot of countries still. But I think we're going back to more of those days of like helping each other build, or, you know, trading amongst each other rather than having to go to the supermarket. Like, what we're trying to do is remove the reliance on the system. And how do we do that? Well, we need community, and we need a strong community to be able to do that. And we need good leadership to be able to help put some of those things together. So I think that that's really, you know, creating the new is also going back to the old and
Absolutely.
getting rid of the corruption and getting rid of the reliance on the system.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
Yeah, going back to the festival, for the people that haven't heard of it or weren't able to go because it's down in Australia, maybe just tell a little bit about how that came together and I guess why it was so successful. Why do you think the LFM Festival first year, it was like 1,000+ people showed up? What made that work so well in such a short time frame?
Yeah, I think that there's probably a couple of things. The first thing that I would say is that I felt like it was being led from the very beginning, from a higher spiritual sense. There was something there that certain doors opened up and I lent into it, and then more of the right people came to help. And some of those, so then we ended up with a really strong team who had done festivals before, a lot of them, and they volunteered to be a part of it because they knew that this sort of thing was needed. So the first thing was that I think there was a spiritual leading, then opening up the doors. I sort of threw it up to the universe and said, well, we need help here, and the right people came. And then from there, I think also people really needed it. So when it went out, we, had enough people. It was really interesting because the marketing, we didn't really have time to put out what it was about. There was really, we're still on the run trying to work out, stalls and, what entertainment we're going to have and how many stages and where you're going to park and all of these things. A lot of those things were worked out right towards the end. But for some reason, it spoke to people. And, that's why I come back to the spiritual side. Maybe I can't really even take credit for that because I don't think we did a great job in marketing. A lot of people had faith. I guess maybe our reputation had helped a little bit in that already, that people who were associated with us were probably the ones who were out there promoting it as well and saying, no, these guys are awesome, come. So that sort of expanded the circle bigger than, just Living Free movement members. There was probably, I think there was only probably a couple of hundred Living Free members, maybe less. And so the fact that it got out to, the majority and they were all like-minded, I was quite surprised at as well, because without communicating those messages, it's very hard to get that. So I think we're very lucky in all of those things coming together. But yeah, it was an amazing event. I think we had great speakers, was another aspect. But yeah, I just feel like it was needed, and that I think comes from this internal feeling and then leaning into it and then going with that. And that's what I've tried to do more and more in the last probably 4 or 5 years, is have faith in that inner voice and that guidance, and it seems to lead me in the right direction. I didn't believe in that stuff prior. So that's another part of that waking up process, is realizing that there's a spiritual side to this. And I thought all of that stuff was crazy, and I avoided people that would talk in that manner. And so, yeah, that's, I have to give a lot of credit to the team that came about, the people that agreed to come and speak. And also, something that I can't quite explain yet in a spiritual sense.
I've got to say, that's one of the things I love about you, Dave, is that you are like, I guess for people that don't know you, like just on face value, like you wouldn't think you're a spiritual guy at all, but knowing you, like you actually are very tapped into that. But I think that's what I love is that, and I think this is like important for people to understand that might be new to it, is that you don't have to be like all love and light and wear white robes and like all of that to be spiritual. Like it's such a personal experience. It's different for everyone. But for someone like you that like just to look at you, you wouldn't think, oh yeah, he's super spiritual, but you are very tapped into that. And like you said, like now that you actually listen to that, it's leading you in the right direction. So it kind of makes things a bit easier where you're not trying to force yourself into things and, coming up against roadblocks and trying to figure things out and do it all yourself. Because I think a lot of people fall into that trap of like, they're just so up in the mind and think they've got to figure life out. But it's really just allowing, really. It's just allowing that divine source, creator, whatever you want to call it, like that energy into you and just letting that guide you.
Yeah, and it's a mix of both, because people go too far one way in the spiritual side and they go, oh, God's going to make it happen, or, you know, I'm just going to leave it to this. That's not how this stuff works. Like, you know, the door gets open, but you still have to walk through it, and then you still have to do the hard work, right?
Absolutely.
But then you might hit roadblocks and you go, I don't know how to deal with this. And you sort of throw it back up there again and go, I need some help, like open up the right doors again, you know, that type of thing. So, you know, people, they get so caught up in the spiritual side of things and they don't actually do the works that it requires to come together. So it's, you know, it's pointless stuff, right? You could pray, you know, 24 hours a day and sit there and achieve nothing in your life. And be, you know, that's controversial for some people, is that, you know, but I don't see being a monk sitting there, I don't see that they're achieving anything, you know, praying all day. But I think it's the mixture of both. You've still got to go and do the stuff. But I feel like where we're going, if you have the right intent, which is a big aspect of all of this, that you're not going to get that help if your intent's not pure. You know, you're trying to do something good. You know, you can't just say, God, I want $1 million, you know, and you know, you don't even know what you're going to do with it to try to help or whatever. So there's got to be this aspect of the physical and, you know, bringing it into the reality, but then, you know, looking into the spiritual and being guided where you can. And that can be a really hard thing to juggle and to understand what to do. And I still am searching for all of those answers, but I think that that's part of, you know, I think what people might like about living free and, you know, the stuff we talk about is we're still trying to figure this out. We're not coming from this, we know it all, you know, come and worship us type situation. We're like, hey, if you want to be part of this journey where we're trying to figure out how to live and how to do this stuff, and we, you know, we've got no idea either, but maybe we've got some extra, you know, things that we've done that you might not have done yet, or vice versa. And the community actually has a whole lot that they bring as well, a whole lot of value. And you see it on the platform all the time. Like, we hardly even answer any questions anymore because there's so many valuable people within the community that will answer other people's questions. So that's the real important part, is not trying to be, I call it the God complex, like trying to put yourself up there as, you know, come and worship me and you'll get all the answers. Because what I find is the most important thing is the answers are inside of us. And so what we're really trying to do is encourage people to get to those answers inside of them, and to bring those talents forward, and to, you know, go into their purpose. Because if you have a look at everything that's done in society in a public view, everything that's promoted with a lot of money behind it, ads, you know, all the rest of it, it's always a distraction away from getting to know who you are. And I take the same thing on religions. You know, I said I was a big part of the sports area. That's just, you know, the Roman circus, as most of us know now, that it's a big distraction. And I'm not saying we can't have these distractions. I watched the rugby the other night, and, you know, I still enjoy doing those things, but knowing that it is a distraction, and that if you spend too much time doing any of those things, you're not going to get to know yourself properly. You're not going to be on purpose. You're not going to hear that voice that's going to guide you in the right way. Because I think, to me, there was always something missing in business. I could do these things, but I didn't have the same satisfaction as I have now, where I feel like I'm on purpose and I'm being guided more. And that's a very different, you know, place to be than previously.
I dig it. Yeah, and that's something I saw when I was in, it is really notable at Music and Sky that you have all these people like Eileen McCusick, who's been on a lot of podcasts, another business owner, and I don't know if you're familiar with her, with biofield tuning, where she's working, well, now she's working with the sports field in Jamaica. She's from the States. She's from like Michigan or something, but she's working with soccer players using tuning forks to help them heal from injuries. And when I met her, she had just recovered from a femur fracture where she healed it in like 8 days or something with a tuning fork. And so there's people that could be like on a pedestal, like, oh wow, they've done these amazing things, they made these amazing discoveries, but we're just standing in a lunch line together, just talking, and I'll get these ideas, and I'm talking. I didn't even know that I was talking to the Eileen McCusick, but I had this idea about how we know, or we're basically remembering things. And I don't listen to a lot of spiritual podcasts, but I've since heard that sort of thing repeated on some of them. But it's like we're not here to like necessarily learn and become better. We're already kind of tapped in. We just have to remember how to access this stuff. Mm-hmm. And then right away she starts confirming that and telling me these stories about how she learned to use tuning forks accidentally, without any input, without anyone teaching her, just intuitively. And it's amazing what you can do with these things and just your voice. But coming together in these communities, it's so cool to see when all the ego is just dropped and you're there experiencing each other just as peers, as friends. It's like something comes from within and you start just sharing it and helping, and the whole group just gets smarter, gets healthier. And I see that for sure with the LFM and what you guys are doing.
Because that top down, like, let's put, these people up on a pedestal and like worship them, like that really is like the old world. You know what I mean? And I think for people, if like you're not sure how to create the new, like look at the world as it is now and just do the opposite, basically. Like, because I think that is very much the old world, is this, and then to go a step deeper into that, that's kind of when you look at how the world's been set up by these, satanic quote unquote elites. They're not elites. They're from the lower realms. They're not above us in any way, shape or form. That's what it's about, the worship of man, which is the complete opposite of what we should be, which is the worship of God, or creator or source or whatever you want to call it. So I think you see that in these new communities, in the LFM and the Alpha Vedic community and Alex community and the Bear community, is that the people that are organizing these communities aren't acting like they're better than everyone and that they know it all and that they should be worshipped. Like, they're on the ground with everyone else. And, like you said with the LFM, like actually promoting the communities to get involved with each other and like put all their ideas forth and come together. And it's so beautiful to see. And it just feels so different. Like, coming from, I grew up, I was born and raised in Sydney. And like before I moved up to the Northern Rivers, I was living, in an apartment with like hundreds of people, like hundreds, probably thousands of people on my street. They were all apartment blocks. I didn't know any of my neighbors. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't know anyone. And most people live their life like that. And it's just worlds apart where we are now.
Yeah, it is. But I still like to be a little bit anonymous as well in my own community. So, I have like the Living Free community. I have all of these things. And that's one part. When I come home, I don't want to know my neighbors, to be honest. I don't really want to have these conversations with them because there's a whole lot of awkward moments. And then I don't know. So there's part of me that still likes to have that, I turn up to pick up my kids from school or whatever. And, I'm quite happy to stand there and say nothing to the other parents and then pick up my kids and go home. And I'm not saying I'll be rude in those conversations. Of course I'll have, conversations and do those things, but it always gets to that, oh, what do you do? And then I go, oh, I've got some online platforms and, oh yeah, what's that about? And then I have to get on that part and then ending up in these conversations, and they can be really good as well, but I do try to avoid having those awkward conversations as well. Oh, what's that stand for? And then what's that? And, to me, I still like having that little bit of privacy in my life where I can just walk in and out. Nobody knows what I do outside of that. And yeah, there's still a lot of that aspect for me as well.
I get that's probably safer for your circumstances, Dave.
Dave Armstrong, the man of mystery.
I think a little bit of keeping some of that stuff. It's like everyone on the community knows a whole lot about, you know what I mean? Like I share everything, the good, the bad sort of stuff. But when it comes to that sort of next part of your life around your neighbors and that sort of thing, if the conversation happens, I'll have it. But I don't go searching for these conversations. That's one thing that I avoid unless they sort of come to me, and I won't lie. But it's you're always sort of stepping that fine line of how much you want to tell somebody, how much do you really want them to know about you.
Yeah.
Website, and then and I'm thinking, you're not going to be interested in my website.
I have a feeling though, because you're the supplement stuff that you guys are getting into, your wife had mentioned something about doing them at the markets. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of, because when you're out in the field and people are like coming by the booth, we've noticed that like people will literally physically like almost stumble into us and be like, oh, this is the exact product that I needed. And then we talk to them and they're like awake to a lot of different things. So it'll be really interesting to see like in that setting, who your business attracts.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. I think I guess because part of my waking up process was when this stuff was really taboo and conspiracy stuff. And, if you mentioned it to anyone, like I had arguments with staff, about this sort of stuff, about vaccines and about this. And we're talking about high performance. These guys have got multiple degrees. They're, looking for these 1% increases in sports performance, yet they're drinking the water from the tap and they're, not looking at some of these other things. And I'm like, you just injected yourself with a whole bunch of poison. Like what's this? And, but you're still looking for that 1%. Like, what if you were actually to start looking at how you're treating your body and what you're doing in these ways? And we were sponsored by Red Bull as well. So we've got free Red Bull at the front of the fridge that anyone could grab however many Red Bull they want. And our athletes coming in, and I'm sitting there trying to justify that, our sponsorship, it's not too bad. It's just a little bit of caffeine, and caffeine's not too bad. And, trying to do all of this. And I'm like, as you sort of learn more, you think back at some of the crazy things you've done as well in what your morals were, I guess, previously in picking up. But I think it's now becoming like a lot of the topics are becoming more into the mainstream. We're being more accepted. So, having a conversation at the market, you're more likely to run into somebody who's also thinking the same way. And so that community of thinkers is growing. And, but my ideas have pretty much stayed the same. It's just the acceptable conversations are now shifting into the fact that some of these are now normal conversations, or you're seeing it a bit more in the mainstream media where they're talking about some of these topics that they've never talked about before. And so I find that interesting that things are shifting, and I guess we have to shift a little bit with being more open to these different public situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I do social media management for the Australian Vaccination Risks Network. It's a bit of a mouthful. It's just the AVN for short. And it's really interesting now seeing, like when I'm posting things, the comments. Like a recent post that I posted was someone talking about how she used to look at mums that didn't vaccinate and the anti-vaxxers, and then she changed her mind because she had it was Candace Owens talking about this. She had a severe vaccine reaction when she researched them. She saw the truth. She chose not to vaccinate her kids. And the amount of comments that said that I used to think the same, but since COVID, I'll never I looked into it, I'll never vax my kids again. There were multiple comments like that. Even the ones that weren't like, quote unquote anti-vax, they were still like we got lots of comments asking like, are there any vaccines like that you would recommend? Are some worse than others? So lots of people are questioning, and that's, I mean, I've said it maybe not from day one, but probably from the time that I kind of woke up and went through that whole process, because it is a process. I'm adamant that it was one of the best things that could have happened to us, as a collective.
Oh, yeah. COVID was great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, like I had a ball. We were, Nico and I were doing things with the protests and stuff down in Melbourne, and you felt like you were running around as criminals fighting against the system, but you knew you were on the right side. So, you're turning up to events and there's 2,000 police and they're, trying to get you to basically get into some sort of physical altercation with them. And like, it was just crazy times, but I loved it. I actually thought it was the best fun. It was like, all of those dreams as a child of fighting against the system or fighting against those things, but knowing that you're on the right side of it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you're like this, Isaac, but I always tried to like watch movies where, like say Point Break, where they rob all the banks and thinking, could I pull that off? and I'd always sit there and think, I would.
It's like V for Vendetta. You guys were like V for Vendetta down there.
Doing the bank robbery, like if you didn't injure anyone, like mentally disturb them or anything, like I love that idea of doing that. And COVID sort of was that in Melbourne. It was like we were planning and thinking about how we could run these protests and do these things, but we're also thinking about how we could outsmart the police. So we'd set up, hey, we're going to send a message here and then all the police will go here, but then we're going to set up the other group here and we're going to spread them here. And so you're doing all of these logistics to try to outsmart what they were doing. And it was...
it was great fun.
We won a few battles. And so, it was good fun.
Isaac is definitely, thank God he wasn't here during that time, because he would have been down there in Melbourne with you. He would have had a whole tactical team. Like,
and especially Nico's got, like I was training out at Nico's gym as well, doing boxing. And so he had a whole MMA community, right? So there was a whole bunch of people who could actually fight, who were gathering together to sort of hold the defenses and, go up against the tyrants. So, it was fun. It was really necessary period. And I think that the pivot of COVID was for those who are aware of this stuff prior to, their main goal was to wake people up, and after COVID, for me, it was like, okay, now it's time to shift, because if you can't see some of this stuff now, then I'm wasting my energy to try to sort of expose that. But now we need to create the alternative option, which is what we spoke about before, creating the new. And that was a real shifting point. There's, they did the waking up for us that we've been trying to do. In fact, one of the crazy schemes that Nico and I did very early on was we were talking about how fluoride was blocking up the pineal gland, and these people weren't seeing the truth because they were dumbed down by the fluoride. And so we would go up to the mountain with a 3-ton truck. We would go up to Mount Donabuang and would fill it up. We had these containers, like Swap and Go, where you go and swap over your gas containers at the station. We came up with that idea for water. So we went up and we sprayed it. We called it Awake Water. And we had these logos on the side, and we had these containers. We'd go up to Mount Donabuang and we'd fill them up, and we'd get back at about 3:30 in the morning with all of these containers, and would sell them out of his gym. So people would buy 2 or 4 containers and then swap them over with full ones. And then that way they had good water. And by doing that, if they had good water, we could start to wake them up. So this was right. It was like,
I love it.
I love it.
And we did that for probably 2 years, going up and down the mountain every 4 weeks or so, and filling up this truck, like overloading the truck with these containers of water. And so, we didn't have to wake people up anymore, and then we could focus on what we were going to do.
I love it.
I love it. What a great covert mission.
That's man.
Cool,
I'm you and I wasn't here for that. That would have been so fun.
Yeah, and you still felt like you were doing something wrong, even though you're getting water from it was a underwater spring, like the 150 meter down spring that comes up, and people line up for the water all the time, but you're literally taking up a truck and you're filling up these containers, and we do it at nighttime so that it was, people wouldn't put complaints in or whatever. But you did feel like it was the same sort of thing with COVID. You felt like you're doing something wrong but right. They don't want us doing this, which is so right.
Yeah,
it's hilarious.
Absolutely.
It's like, all brings me back to The Matrix and other movies. But I like the part about The Matrix where they're tapping in. They're doing this pirate broadcast. And it was a bit like that with Owen Benjamin, especially during that time, because he kept getting banned off of everything that he went on, whether it was YouTube, Instagram. I think he's on like number 14 or something. And so we'd set up these mirror channels and they'd get taken down. We'd have this like text group where we'd, let everybody know where the new channel was, where he'd do his live streams. And then we started doing these bear meetups during that time. And that was really important, but it was just like living a guerrilla thing. But we didn't participate in any like protests or rallies or anything. We just met up in small groups and just helped each other out. We did gardening. We had a friend. He was mailing me boxes of vegetables, and then I'd make videos about growing your own victory garden, getting off of getting a little more food independent from grocery stores. And it was just this whole culture that started really frothing up about stop relying. You don't need to fight and not comply. The trick is don't rely. So be more independent, be more community wise about who you interact with. But I think doing some guerrilla marketing or guerrilla warfare, not anything that would get me put in like a, prison or something, but, maybe jail for a short period of time.
Yeah, there's something fun that we could tap into. I mean, I'm not a protest guy otherwise, but the fact that they didn't want us to protest, that's why I went and did it. So, but once they took that away, like you're allowed to protest again, like I wasn't going to turn up and yell at a building for freedom. But, the fact that I was challenging the system, I'm quite happy to do that. In fact, get behind organising some of the events. Yeah. Up the Peacemakers over that time, which was a group to basically stand in between the police and the protesters. So if there was any protesters that got out of line, we would deal with that, and vice versa on the police. And some of the events, one in particular, Nico and I ran with the police, and they were quite happy to work with us. So they would come up to myself and Nick and say, where do you guys want to, take the protest group? And we'd say what streets, and they would go ahead, and we worked with the police and we did all of those things. The lady actually gave us a big recommendation afterwards.
Wow.
And she said they were great to work with. She got demoted.
Oh, wow.
And they said it came out at one of the other protests. We spoke to her again. She said, yeah, since, we did that other stuff, they won't put me on any of these things again. So it was interesting because they wanted to make us the enemy, but we were really trying to just peace and do those things. But then once they started to get aggressive and started to do those things, then we also stepped up, those areas as well. So, but yeah, I mean, going in with that peaceful intent.
It's all about marketing, man. Yeah. Violent protests are easier to market than a peaceful one.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny you say that actually, Dave, because I was the same. So, of course, Mom, what she's like. She was doing rallies and protests like all through 2020, like since COVID first hit. And she kept inviting me and I never went. And it was just funny, actually, even a couple that I wanted to go to, I just always happened to be working. It didn't matter whether it was on a Saturday or a Sunday, I just always happened to be working. So I wasn't meant to go. And the first one I actually went to was in 2021 when they first announced the lockdown. I think it was like the following week or whatever. And honestly, it was such a peaceful protest. It was like so many people. And it was so like during that time, like for me, it was so nice to be around like thousands of other people that were like-minded when I was, everyone was so used to like being the only person on their street, like, against this stuff or whatever. And then that night on the news, just all this stuff that like didn't happen, like, and there was a
drama.
Yeah, like there was a, and because they obviously plant people. Like I fully believe that, whether it's the police or whoever, they plant people and then they have the news crews there ready to catch things. And like, I saw a few things that happened that we were kind of like, it's a bit off. And we could feel like at the end of it, we kind of felt the energy change and we just left. because there was a guy in the crowd like fire throwing, and we were like, that's weird. Like, this isn't not a festival, like a carnival. It's not, why would someone be there throwing fire? And then
jugglers and
and then that night on the news, it was like someone lit a fire and they had to, police had to go in and put it out, and like some guy punched a horse, and the actual video of the guy that punched the horse, he didn't touch the horse. Like, it's just, they'll turn it around. Like, they have to invert it, right? Like, most of the people that go, it's a peaceful protest, but they have to invert it and make it sound like it's violent and these people are crazy anti-vaxxers, and they shouldn't even be out. If they were saying that if COVID's cases spike, it's because of the protest, and everyone was like, but everyone at the protest like doesn't believe in COVID, and they're not going to get tested. So how does that even make sense?
Yeah, but I mean, there was something about the protest that was special. So for those who went, and a lot of people talk about Canberra, I never went to the Canberra one, but they talk about how special it was. And that's really, I guess, another part of the motivation of the festival was, let's get together, because there hasn't really been a reason to get together since those protests for a lot of people, like en masse, to do those things. So, let's get together, but let's actually talk about the solutions, not the problem anymore. And let's not yell at a building. Let's actually gather together and come up with what the new is and those things. So that's a big aspect of what that festival was, because I did actually, when I went to the protest, I did actually have a lot of fun and enjoy being around those people. And it did feel good to do that. So I think a lot of people felt that when they went, and it wasn't what they saw on the news. As you're sort of saying, there was a different feeling on these protests until they went aggressive and did some of those things, and then it turned, and then those people like Isaac and myself got excited because that gave the permission to then step it up to that next point. But in general, they were very peaceful and they had that intent. But yeah, once they start punching people, you've got a reason to get involved.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is probably a good segue into, because I want you to talk a little more about in-power movement and what that's all about, because I guess that's really one of the ways that people can start to make real change instead of like fighting the government and fighting, going to protests and doing all this. It's one of the really practical ways that people can take back their authority. So can you just explain a little about what Empower Movement is and how people can get involved and take back their authority through lawful processes?
Yeah, so Empower Movement, I got involved with probably 6.5, 7 years ago now. I saw a documentary called Empower Episode 1, and you can still look it up on YouTube and that sort of thing. And that was quite inspiring. They spoke about this lawful stuff. They spoke about jurisdiction and how jurisdiction works, and how there's this sort of hidden system called law merchant or lex mercatoria, in which if you started to apply some of those laws that they're still in play today, but we're not taught about them. If we started doing some of those things, we can start getting results in the system that's there, because they still have to somewhat play in that system. So that became quite interesting from an educational point. When I met them, they'd actually just gone viral through Dr. McCullough. So they went on Dr. McCullough, but they had these documents which they'd tested and done some different processes with, but they didn't have the ability to do it en masse, which was the idea, was to do a worldwide movement. So Cal Washington, who came up with the notice of liability, he was staying up late at night. He was still working construction at the time, and he was basically answering everyone's questions. How do I do this? How do I send the bill now? What do I do from here? And it became quite obvious that they needed, processes in place and systems in place. That's when I sort of got involved with them, and then I ended up helping to build a whole lot of those things and building the automation and learning all of these things. So it took quite a few years to get all the systems built to then relaunch on a worldwide scale. But they did a couple of groups where the first cause that they were doing was smart meters. And smart meters were effectively what's on your house, or on your electrical or water smart meters, and they're basically tracking all that information, sending it back. A lot of them were catching on fire and causing fire issues on the houses, and some of them burning down. And then there's also the radiation that's put out from that. So people were experiencing headaches and cancers and different things from the technology that they were putting on. So they would send out what they call a notice of liability, and a notice of liability would hold accountable and responsible those who were causing the harm. So it could have been from the smart meter companies, or it could have been from the government. And they were sending them these documents using these processes, and then effectively billing them. So it's sort of flipping the system. So it's accepting what they're doing under a thing called a conditional acceptance, and then putting your information on the top, or your agreement on top, which was that they're going to pay you for every day that they can't prove that it's safe, or that they remove this technology. So that's in essence what they did. Now they've got a few more agendas, and they've spread worldwide. So I think they're in about 15 or 16 countries. They've got vaccination, geoengineering, 5G, and smart meter being the original one. And so what's happening is a lot of the government agencies or different people in these companies that are causing this harm are stepping down once they receive this documentation. So that seems to happen quite a lot, and they seem to be concerned about that. And the other part of that is this billing process, which I think has the ability to be the new financial system. Is effectively they're sort of taking money from the old system in these bills of exchange, creating that, and then moving it across, and they'll do some sort of crypto with it, be able to trade with it. So that's where they're currently heading with it. And it's a really good group as well. Same sort of thing, when we've spoken about all these other groups, if you go into that, very like-minded people, aware of all of that, but they're using this lawful process, these documents, to hold accountable those that are causing the harm. And those that are causing harm are concerned about it enough to, a lot of them, resign. And the idea is, if you keep putting enough pressure on there, they can't fill these positions, especially those high positions. And the system, will eventually collapse under the weight of what they're doing. It's a really fascinating thing. It's something that, if you look up Empower Movement, or you look up Cal Washington, you'll see lots of interviews with him. He's a fascinating guy, and someone I believe in, who we brought out for the festival. It's good to be doing something in that way. Once again, they don't want us to do it, but we're doing it in a respectful, lawful manner, and an honourable way of dealing with these effectively weapons that are being deployed against us.
Yeah, Cal's so awesome. He's such an amazing speaker too, because at the festival, when he was talking about this, and when he actually mentioned all of the names of the politicians and the people that have resigned, it's really funny because, we were hearing these things. Not in the mainstream news, some of them, but like a lot of them were in our sort of circles. We were hearing that these people were resigning, and that it was, I was hearing. And then when Cal said, I was like, oh wow, that was actually through all the stuff that Empower Movement is doing. So they're actually because I think a lot of times you hear these movements coming together, or these groups, and especially in the lawful, that lawful space, and they're doing all these things. But again, I really think it comes down to the energy that people are operating from. I feel like when people are operating from a place of anger or wanting to fight the government, the stuff they're doing doesn't really go anywhere. The stuff that Empower is doing, you can actually see there's tangible results. So it's so awesome.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we can't, as much as we would love to claim all of the resignations as us, if they've received a document, we don't really know why they resign, but it becomes, okay, that's a coincidence. And then there's another coincidence. And then it's well, how many coincidences is it before it's not a coincidence? So, that's really where we're at. We say, okay, they got sent. So all we can say is they got sent some documents and they resigned at this point. And And so we can't prove that the two are related, but we do know, like an example is Sean, who was over in WA, sent it to McGowan, who is the Premier of Western Australia. He sent a document there, and he got a note. He used a notary for notarizing his documents, and they sent some government officials out to tell the notary to not sign these documents anymore. They did do another lot of signing, and then McGowan stepped down. So then there's like coincidence and then there's some extra information that if they thought this stuff was rubbish, they would just throw it in the bin. They wouldn't bother sending anyone out to talk to the notary and do those things. So, I find that interesting. A lot of the resignations you'll hear when they happen, they're kind of shock resignations. Like they've still got a lot of time on their term. They've just been voted back in. They give reasons that don't really make sense. So it'll be like, oh, I've got to leave for family reasons or this or stress or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I'm always careful on claiming that it was us that did it, because I feel like a lot of people claim these things, but we can't really prove it. But we can say that there seems to be a lot of coincidences when they receive these documents.
That's epic. That reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever come across Vox Day. He's an American. He lives in Italy, and he's written a book called Corporate Cancer. And in that book, he talks about this because he's a bunch of things, including he used to be on the charts with a techno band back in the 90s. He's done video game designing. So he's a game designer, very high IQ, writes massive books, like fantasy novels. He's a fighter, like all this stuff. He's a weird, what do they call that? I don't know. He's like Michelangelo or something. Like he has all these different facets. But anyways, one of the things he likes doing is being a thorn in the side. Like he's banned from Google Campus. They won't kick him off of YouTube because he's kind of got them in a chokehold with legal stuff. So they just kind of ignore him. But he's been fighting this culture war. And in the book Corporate Cancer, he talks about how they basically destroyed or shut down one of these. It was like a book awards ceremony that was going woke, where all the people winning the book awards were like pedophiles, were these creeps and weirdos, or were pushing the gay agendas and all these other things. And so they started this kind of guerrilla network of nerds online, or fantasy fiction fans, and began emailing the heads of all these things. And it was a part of the what was it, Gamergate, if you remember that in the news from years ago, where the news was trying to put this idea out there that gamers were sexist, and it was all about putting down women and all this stuff. But anyways, they were able to successfully get the head writers or managers of these news agencies to step down, other gaming companies, several people in the fiction publishing world. And it was through emails and just being really annoying. But just, I don't know, that's like a kindred spirit, I think, but to the more, like the organized legal aspect of in power movement and sending these notices. Because you have people from all over the world, and they basically, they go on, they fill out a form or they download it, they put in the information, and then they mail it to a certain person or to whoever they want to put on notice. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I wanted to ask too, Dave, just to piggyback off that, is like for anyone that wants to do this stuff, do they have to have prior knowledge of the legal processes, or is it all taught once you join?
Yeah, no, it's all taught once you join. And the good thing is that you can actually apply this stuff to a whole range of different lawful things that you might come across in your life. So you'll learn, a lot of the basic stuff in the lawful process, where you've got 3-step process. So you've got your notice. They go into default. So there's fault and then default. So you've got a 3-step process. You've got a conditional acceptance. So you'll learn about a conditional acceptance process. You'll learn about how to mail documents in a lawful manner. The billing side of things, you'll have first notice to debtor, second notice to debtor, third notice to debtor, which is how they do that. So we're using their system against them. So we've received these things. So when you get a bill in the mail, you'll see that then they've got their first notice, second notice, third notice, and then they can actually sell that debt to a debt collector. So it's a perfected bill by that stage because you haven't challenged it in the appropriate manner. So we're using that system against them, but the stuff that you learn, you can use against, any thing that comes in. So, if someone puts in a claim, they've got to put in their evidence. And so the claim, they've actually started the process because they're actually deploying this technology without our consent. So we can't get away from 5G. So that 5G is actually penetrating, assaulting my body, whether I like it or not, simply because they're putting up these towers. So because they've initiated it, we can then add our terms onto that. That's how this commercial system works. So a lot of the things that you'll learn across this process can be applied in other areas of your life, and part of the sort of growing in lawful knowledge also gives you the power and strength to know that the system is actually not that bad. So if you know how to play the game, the problem is we've been, this is the example I use, is that, you've got a checkerboard or a chessboard, it looks the same, right? You've got squares and it's broken up. So effectively, we've been playing checkers and they've been playing chess. So we just didn't know what game they were playing. And now that we know what game they're playing and how the system works, we can actually win. And that's the difference, is that you can't win in a system if you're playing the wrong game with the wrong rules. But once you sort of learn that stuff. So yeah, you don't need any prior knowledge. The system's built with all of that. Cal and I go on and do regular webinars in teaching some of these things as well. So there's all that education on there where people can go through, and that will build the strength internally as well. And people actually change across the time in which they're doing these things, where they're stepping out of that fear and they're moving into knowing their strength internally, and that they actually have power, which is all the things that they don't want us to know, is that you personally have that power. So it's a really important thing to learn. Not only from the documents in which you're serving and doing, but also from all of that knowledge that's gathering and all of that internal growth as well.
Yeah, and that's what I love about Cal's approach to it, and his journey with it is, and you hear, I mean, not everyone talks about this, but I know Cal's not the only one, but the way he puts it, he's so eloquently spoken, and he, I think through his own experience, when he speaks about it, it's like you just get it, is that this journey is like doing the lawful processes. It's actually a spiritual journey. Sky talks about that too. And the guys from Sovereign by Design who are teaching similar stuff. And it's actually a spiritual journey. It's not just like, oh, you're going to do the paperwork and send it off. And like, you can do that. But I think that's where people aren't really seeing results, because anyone can write up a piece of paper and sign it and send it off. But it's like, what's your intent? What's your, where are you at with yourself? Like, do you know yourself? Because, we talk about this world of, public versus private, and, fiction versus reality, and that that's all. The paperwork is all just fiction, but it's us that make it real. It's us that give it the power. So yeah, that's what I just love about that whole thing. I think it's practical, but it's also, yeah, it is, I think, it can be a way to get to know yourself better, and come more into like who you really are as a person, and connecting to source.
Yeah, absolutely. And the two go hand in hand, right? Is that it comes back to that part, almost back to the start where we spoke about that spiritual side and then doing the actual thing. Both of those things have to come together to be able to get those results. But if you put documents in and you do those things and you have a bad intent, that you want to harm them, or you want to get revenge back for this, or you want to do that, quite often they won't have that. It's strange how it works. It won't work usually when you do that. But if you put the right intent into it, that you want peace and you want this and you want that, there seems to be, however we can explain that, and people can go into different reasons for why this is, but it seems to have a different effect. And we did this with a whole bunch of promissory notes. We helped a whole lot of people do these promissory notes, and we would put almost like a prayer as we put the mail in, but it would be like your intent. This is what I want, and we would never allow someone to get back into debt. It was always about getting them out of the system as the reason to help. But we had a whole lot of success by doing that, where people were getting their credit cards paid off and their bank loans and all of those things using documents, just using their system. If you understand that you can actually put in paperwork for this stuff, but a whole lot of people tried to replicate that, but I think their intent was different. So it was like, greed. I want to get this money, and I want to do this, and I want to buy a new car or a TV or whatever. And so they wouldn't get the same results. And so I've seen this time and time again over the last 7 or 8 years that I've been doing this stuff, is that when people have the wrong intent, and I also think that that's where the world's going. We spoke about those festival groups, or those groups who are doing good communities. I think it's their intent, the reason that they're going to be successful. And those who are that old world thinking of greed, monopoly, treating people badly and, getting ahead for doing that, which is actually the corporate world that I came from, is that you'd often see people rewarded for behaviors that weren't good. And so I don't think that that's the world that we're moving to. And I think there's a change that the people who have that good intent, who are trying to do good things with their knowledge and using their purpose, what they're here for, I think that those people are going to be rewarded or given more responsibility to bring those things forward. And those who have got the bad intent, they're most likely going to collapse. And you see it quite a lot, where a group of people get together, but they're pushing fear and they're doing this stuff. And I won't have them on the platform. I won't promote these groups. I won't do that. The next thing comes in and they're saying, oh, on this date, we're going to take over the courts. We're going to charge this. We're going to do, this sort of type things. We're going to be sheriffs and we're going to arrest the prime minister for treason of whatever, whatever the next wacky theory is. Those dates never come forward, never happens. The group usually internally collapses because there's ego and greed and whatever else that's in there. And you see it time and time again. So I don't think they're going to be successful. I think those who want to do good and have got the right intent for it and listening to that purpose will be those that are going to be given those responsibilities in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I mean, I had my own experience with that, with just like a fine that I received. And this was like 2021, and it was around the time when I started to just hear about how, a lot of the law, the way it's set up is very unlawful and that we shouldn't have to pay taxes and whatever. But I didn't do any research, didn't really look into stuff. It was like when I was first introduced to it, and I got a fine, and I was like, and I actually think I got the fine during lockdown. So I was like, fuck this, I'm not paying it. And I just started sending them back. Like I just was sending them like return to sender, because apparently people had done that and that had worked. Apparently, I don't know. I don't actually know. And it ended up going on so long that they canceled my license and registration, or suspended it because I hadn't paid the fine. The fine just kept getting accumulated and accumulated. So I think what was maybe $100 and something fine turned into like $500 or something. And like, I was just like so angry and fighting it. And then by the time I started to learn more, I was like, I'll just take it to court. I couldn't take it to court because it had been too long. And then I ended up getting pulled over for having driving on a suspended license and registration. And then I had to, and that was like $2,700 worth of fines. I got like 4 separate fines for that. And then I was like, well, I've got to take this to court because I can't pay that. And it was just interesting because the first one, again, it was like there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of like, fuck the system, fuck the government. I was like, I'm not doing that. And nothing panned out. Actually, sorry, just to rewind, I had written a couple of notices too, but I didn't do it. I didn't do the 3-step. I didn't do it within whatever, the 28 days and whatever. And I think the first notice got them to lift the suspension, but that was only for a period of time. Then it got suspended again. Then I got pulled over. And then the second time, so then when I opted to take it to court, I didn't end up going to court because I had adjourned once, and then the next date I like wasn't prepared because I was going to be representing myself. Anyway, I ended up filling out the form to have them like hear the matter without me there. And I just fully surrendered because I actually got to a point where I was like, I actually don't want to put energy into this. And I didn't have that fighting energy anymore. I was just like, I actually don't, I just don't care. If I have to pay the fines, I'll pay the fines. I would much rather be putting my energy elsewhere. Like Isaac had just moved over at that time. I was like, I want to put my energy into my new relationship and like all the things that we were doing here. And I wasn't even there. And then I got the matter, like the result emailed to me, and they knocked off $1,000 off the fines. And I was like, okay, well, I wasn't expecting that. And that was including the court fees. It was like, I ended up paying like $1,200 less than what the original fines were. And honestly, that's all I could put it down to. I was like, my energy had completely shifted. Like every time I was like wanting to fight and I was angry, it just went nowhere. It turned into a bigger issue. And then when I just kind of surrendered to it and like, and again, I think like your intention is so important because that I literally said it out aloud. I was like, I don't want to put energy into this. I don't want to fight it. I'm just going to like give it away, surrender to it, and whatever happens, happens. I was fully expecting to pay the $2,700 plus court fees, and I actually got a really good result. So I just think that's a really perfect example of that. Like the energy behind those types of things really will determine the outcome.
Yeah, and look, most of these things are from experience, right? Like we've all done them. It's not sitting there saying, hey, like you're doing the wrong thing, because it's kind of almost part of that journey is the fight part and then the fear part and all of those things. It's when the more that you're doing those things and you see what works and what doesn't, you start to go with more what works. And then, so that's a lot of the stuff that we talk about on the platform is just more trying to give a nudge in the right direction where you're probably going to have a little bit more success in this way and less resistance. And, the other part is that we get in this idea that we have to fight everything. And that's also not the case, because if you're caught up fighting every fine that you've ever got, and you're in court all the time and you're doing all of that, there's a whole lot of stress and it can take you off your purpose. And so therefore, I always look at things like an energetic war, is that if you have a purpose here, which we all have a purpose, but if you've found that purpose and you're getting pulled away from that, then they're winning that energetic war. And you might go, well, I won this fine and it took me 6 months and I went to court 10 times or whatever, but I eventually won. Yeah, I got them. Well, you avoided $100 fine. It cost you, this much of your time. Unless you were using it to educate yourself to do that, it wasn't worth it because it took you away from what you were doing. So that purpose is really important, because your purpose could be to learn, and using a fine is a good way to learn the court process and those sorts of things. But yeah, not at the expense of those bigger things. And for you, it was the relationship and Isaac coming over that, but imagine if you chose to fight all of those things and you take that energy away from that opportunity to get to Isaac, to get to know him better, because you're fighting this stuff, and then things don't necessarily work out because you haven't given the energy to what you needed to. So, that's the important stuff with this as well, is balancing up how much we fight, how much we create, what our purpose is. It is really that balance between all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, shifting gears just before we land the plane here, speaking about where we want to put our energies, is there anything you want to say about next year's festival or the energy we're putting into keeping this momentum? And I don't know, got anything big planned?
And anything new coming up with the Living Free movement platform? Because I know you've been talking about the marketplace for a while, but what are the plans? What's coming up?
Yeah, well, Living Free Festival will come again for sure. It'll be in the same location, probably about the same time of year. We are investigating doing a second one in Perth as well. So we've got some people over. So we might do 2 next year, and we might do more the year after if they go successful. But the idea is to go bigger next year and to see the property itself could take more people if we do some different things logistically as to where we camp everyone and do that sort of thing. So we're looking at all of those things at the moment and been working on that the whole way through. So it will be bigger and better, and we although it was a huge success, there's always things that we can do better in how we run it and the lessons that we learned on those things. So that's the plan, is to improve it and make it bigger and better for next year, and then potentially also do Perth. What else are we working on? Yes, we are still looking at the marketplace and getting that going. We've got a new course that's going to be released soon, which is a breathwork course. So that's
amazing
on board as well. So that'll be over the next few weeks, I reckon, before I release that one with Adam, who was actually at the festival doing the breathwork stuff.
Oh, yeah. I remember Adam. Yeah, good guy.
Yeah, so he's going to be a part of releasing a course for that. The biggest stuff we're working on is actually working on these groups coming together in some way, shape, or form. So we've been having conversations with some of these leaders in which we've spoken about and how that could occur, because everyone's intent, coming back to that, was that we need to start working together. You know, it's great that everyone's got their own things, but to really make a difference on a worldwide scale, we need to work together and help each other. And I don't mind if the journey of someone is to go to one of, you know, they go here and then they go over to this group or whatever, as long as they're being looked after and helping them elevate so that everyone's growing, rather than trying to hold on to a member at the sake of their growth. So everyone who I've spoken to in that side is keen to do that. And the other part is there's a lot of groups out there who don't have that good intent, and people are still getting caught up with that. So I think the more the good groups work together, we don't have to point out all the people that are doing the bad stuff. We just need to elevate those that are doing the good. And by natural way, they will actually fall off more and more, and people will get onto track. And as long as they get within, you know, some of those groups that I've mentioned, I'm sure there's a bunch of others that are also good with the same intent, you know, they're going to grow and the world's going to change because of that. And that's the big stuff that we're working on.
That's awesome. So exciting. Nice. I know at the festival, Mike Witter and Alex Zeg both said, like, we should just, because they're all doing the same thing. They've all got their own festivals, and they were like, we should do a worldwide unity event. All these communities come together, and like, that would just be the ultimate. That would be so awesome.
Yeah. I think some big things will keep coming, and yeah, I mean, that's what I like, is the big stuff that people think that you can't pull off. Is we try to do that and inspire others to do the same sort of thing, is to take some risks and have a crack, because, you know, I hadn't run a festival before, and we were lucky to get some people on board that had run festivals, but realistically, I mean, it's a big thing. You could put it out there and no one turns up. So it's a lot of money to run a festival as well. So there's a lot of risk in doing that stuff. But if you don't have a little bit of risk and you don't listen to that inner voice, and you go, because there was times during that where I'm like, am I sure I heard that voice that said to do this? And it wasn't a literal voice, for those who are thinking, but that I wish I did have those literal voices. It would be a whole lot clearer, and I wouldn't question myself so much. But yeah. But you know, knowing that was what I thought I was meant to do, and then that we pull it off, and it was an amazing experience. Just consolidates those times in which you feel like you're being led.
And you were built for the big stuff, Dave. You were just, definitely on purpose. I think you're definitely made for this and everything you're doing and leading, and you're such a pioneer and an inspiration, and we're very blessed. I speak for my whole family, because my parents as well know you and love you, and we're very blessed to call you a friend and be involved with you guys and everything that you're doing. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. And to reiterate, like, you guys are awesome. I love the energy that you guys bring to everything that you do, and your whole family. So it's a pleasure to be not only friends in that way, but also you guys are always a part of what we do, and you bring that energy that is so important, that feeds everything else. So you know, everyone's got their part in it, and I think we're just trying to bring whatever we can. So thank you.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what comes next and to be a part of it and help promote it. And more importantly, get to experience it. And for those listening, if you're planning a trip in the next year or so, put Australia down on there. Come over and be a part of the festival and the movement that's growing here, and then take that energy back with you home. And it's this cross-pollination that's happening. We don't need to change the world. We just need to, if there's things within us that we need to change, that's where we've set our focus. And then we come together with like-minded people. And then through that energy, we'll see transformation. And I don't know, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we'll pop all of your links in the show notes, Dave, because you've got a lot going on. So we'll just pop down all the websites for how people can get involved in all the different things that you're doing. And thanks again, and we'll chat to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure.
That was a powerhouse interview and a half. I am, blown away by just moving here and meeting someone like Dave and being able to work, with them and for him and I just, behind the scenes, I'm helping editing some of the videos from the LFM festival. There's some amazing talks from Mike Winter, from Alex Zek, and Cal Washington, and those are going to be up on the platform hopefully in the coming weeks. So if you haven't joined the LFM, the Living Free Movement, check out the links in the show notes and join us.
Yeah, for anyone that's not aware of the Living Free Movement and what the platform's actually all about, definitely check it out. We've got the links in the show notes. Because honestly, I cannot recommend the LFM highly enough to people. For anyone that's wanting to explore, alternate ways of living, whether it's through health, whether it's through lawful processes, whether it's learning to grow your own food, there is just so much content on the, each individual platform. And just the value you get, for $200 a year, you get access to all the platforms. And I think there's 5 or 6 of them. And you couldn't get through all of the content within a year. There's so much on there. There's regular weekly webinars that you can join live and ask questions live. They get some of the most awesome people on from all over the world, experts in their field. Plus you get an amazing community of people. We've literally met lifelong friends through the Living Free movement. And can't recommend them highly enough. Definitely check them out if you haven't already. And definitely look out for the next festival. They'll be doing another one next year. Not sure when yet, but I know it's going to be epic, whatever they do.
Yeah. So my favorite is Academy, and that's the one where Ali Demigard came in, right? So right after the people that tried to shoot Trump's ear off, allegedly, Ali Demigard comes in shortly after that, and with Dave, and they talk about what was going on behind the scenes possibly, and some of the things that Ali notices, who's got a very specific set of skills and a very interesting story. It's just, you don't see that kind of stuff, that kind of collaboration on too many other platforms. And the Academy, the lawful me, spiritual me, there's stuff going on week by week that you couldn't get through if you took every day your whole life. It's just going to keep growing and adapting. And
like Dave said in the interview, they don't claim to have all the answers. Even when Ollie Demigard comes on, he doesn't outright say, well, for some things he does, but he doesn't really outright say how it happened, what actually happened. He just looks at the evidence and disproves the mainstream narrative and how that couldn't have happened.
Right.
And that's what I love too about, because most of the people they have on too are kind of like that. They're we don't have all the answers, but this is the evidence we have for what we do know about, their particular field or whatever it is. And it just invites more questioning and people to open up their minds and just be, more open-minded and more fluid in their thinking, and being able to make their own mind up about things instead of just taking mainstream narratives or, even in the truther community, just taking something that someone says and just, applying it as that's the absolute truth.
Yeah, and it's open for other people's opinions and questions and all that as well. So when they do one of these live calls, at the end of it, typically they let people come in with their questions, or Dave reads them out if they're written in the chat. And it's more interactive. It's very personable, and yeah, I think that's really unique across the space, especially for the price. So
yeah, and we've also got a link to InPower, which Dave also talked about. So for anyone that's wanting to get involved with that, that's interested, that link is in the show notes too. So check that out. We fully support everything that Dave does because he is an absolute legend, and again, he just does everything with such pure intentions, and he really does want to be of service to people and create a better world for our future, for our children.
Yeah, and I just feel honored that he's on our show because he's not one to really put himself out in front of the camera too much, except for the LFM when he's asking questions and stuff for the guests. But it's he's kind of just quietly working behind the scenes, and it's just cool that he was able to pop on here and talk more about his personal story and where he came from, because I think that's such a interesting trove of wisdom, that guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So don't forget to take advantage of our Black Friday sale. Get 20% off of everything on our site, including the already discounted 3-pack of Alleviate. 3 of them is 15% off. You take an additional 20% off of that. So it's, a really good time to get stocked up.
Get in, guys. This is one of our biggest sales of the year. So the code to use is BFS20. We'll have that in the show notes with the link to Natural Art Form. So check that out, and we will see you next time.
Peace.